Bully pours milkshake on the wrong Navy SEAL. The entire diner froze the moment the thick strawberry milkshake splattered over the Navy veteran's head, dripping down his face in slow, heavy streaks as every single person at the nearby tables pulled back in a mix of shock and disbelief, because nobody could understand why a grown man in an expensive suit would suddenly start laughing like he had just pulled the greatest prank in the world, while the soldier he targeted remained completely still, staring straight ahead with the calm, unreadable expression of someone who had seen far worse things than a spoiled bully with a cup of sugar and an audience. The bully's friends roared with laughter, slapping the table, pointing, gasping for breath, believing they had just humiliated an old man in uniform, imagining this was some kind of hilarious joke to record and brag about later. But the older man didn't even lift a hand to wipe the pink foam sliding down his jaw, and that strange silence, his silence, made laughter around him begin to crack, like everyone suddenly sensed that something was very, very wrong. Before we begin, don't forget to hit like, repost, or share, and subscribe. And I'm really curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Back to the story. Because the man in that uniform wasn't just any veteran. He was a Navy SEAL who had served long enough to recognize aggression before it even had a shape. A SEAL who knew how to stay calm in storms far more violent than a rich kid with a craving for attention. And the only reason he wasn't reacting yet was because he was still giving the bully a single silent chance to walk away before the situation shifted into something he wouldn't be able to laugh through. But the bully kept going, leaning over the veteran's shoulder with a grin that showed he had never been punched in the mouth by consequences, taunting him loudly, calling him Grandpa Soldier, asking how it felt to be slow, washed up, and useless, practically begging everyone in the room to applaud him. And the people who had been laughing seconds earlier now stared at their plates, realizing the man in the camouflage jacket wasn't weak, he was simply controlled, the kind of controlled that came from discipline, danger, and decades of experience most civilians couldn't even imagine. The waitress standing by the counter covered her mouth, unable to move, because she knew the veteran. He came in twice a week, always polite, always tipping well, always sitting in the same corner with a quiet smile, and she had never seen his eyes turn the deep, dark shade they were turning now, a color that warned anyone with common sense to back away immediately. But common sense was something the bully had never learned. He stepped even closer.
How about a little dessert on your lap there, tough guy?
Snatched the veteran's plate and dumped it into his lap, laughing harder, cheering himself on, bragging loudly that real soldiers were only tough in movies, completely unaware that the room had shifted from amusement to dread, and that the only person still enjoying this humiliation was him. The veteran finally inhaled slowly, the kind of slow breath that made the entire diner hold theirs at the same time, because they knew, even before he moved, that the line had been crossed so far it had disappeared. His chair pushed back with a low, steady scrape, not rushed, not violent, just controlled enough to make the bully take one involuntary step backward as the older man stood, milkshake still dripping down his temples, shoulders square, posture unshakably strong, and the moment he lifted his eyes, the laughter in the bully's throat died like someone had shut off a switch inside him. Because for the first time, he understood. He hadn't just poured a milkshake on a man. He had provoked a Navy SEAL. The moment the Navy SEAL rose to his full height, the bully felt something he had never experienced before. Real fear, the kind that crept up the spine like cold water and made the room feel smaller, heavier, and impossibly silent, as if the air itself knew something dangerous was waking up inside the man he had just humiliated. And for the first time in his pampered life, he realized that actions had weight, and that some people carried a history that should never be disrespected, not even as a joke. The SEAL didn't shout, didn't shove him, didn't even reach for him. Instead, he stepped forward with the slow, deliberate precision of someone who had survived situations far more threatening than a loudmouth in a suit. And his voice, when it finally cut through the air, was calm enough to be terrifying, a low, steady warning that made every person in the diner straighten in their seats as if pulled by an invisible command. He told the bully that in all his years of service, years spent overseas, years protecting people who never knew his name, years spent carrying teammates through chaos, through fire, through fear, he had never once raised his voice at a civilian, never once used his training to intimidate anyone weaker than him. And he wasn't about to break that discipline now, not even after being drenched in a milkshake, insulted, mocked, and treated like an object instead of a human being who had given half his life to a country full of people just like the bully standing in front of him. But then his tone shifted, tightening just enough to make the bully swallow hard, because the SEAL explained that while he would not lay a finger on him, he would make sure he understood something his parents, his friends, and the strangers who egged him on had never taught him. Respect, not demanded, but deserved. Dignity, not taken, but protected. And consequences, not as violence, but as accountability. The one thing the bully had spent his whole life dodging by hiding behind money, behind jokes, behind crowds. The SEAL leaned closer, so close the bully could smell the strawberry milkshake dripping off his uniform, and he told him that humiliating a veteran, any veteran, not just him, wasn't a joke. It was a wound, not the physical kind, but the kind that cut into memories soldiers carried long after they came home. Memories brothers lost, missions survived, promises kept, and sacrifices civilians would never fully understand. By the time he finished speaking, the bully's friends weren't laughing anymore. Their faces were pale, stiff, almost ashamed as they shrank back into their seats, realizing they had encouraged something cruel without thinking, without empathy, without understanding that their entertainment had a human cost. And then the SEAL did something none of them expected. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a few bills, crumpled, damp from the milkshake, and placed them gently on the table next to the shattered remnants of his meal, apologizing softly to the waitress for the mess he hadn't caused, thanking her for always being kind, and promising he would clean up anything she needed help with. His restraint stunned everyone. His grace silenced the room more powerfully than any punch ever could. Shaking, the bully blurted out an apology, not elegant, not confident, just raw and trembling, the kind that spills from someone who finally recognizes the weight of his own actions. And he begged the SEAL to understand that he hadn't meant harm. He had only wanted attention. He had only wanted to make people laugh. He had only acted without thinking, because thinking was something he rarely did. The SEAL studied him for a long moment, then nodded once, a gesture that offered forgiveness but not absolution, understanding but not approval. And he told the bully that the real test wasn't saying sorry, it was choosing never to repeat the kind of behavior that required an apology in the first place. With that, the SEAL turned, lifted his soaked jacket, straightened his posture, and walked toward the door with the same quiet strength he had entered with, leaving behind a room full of people who would never forget what they had witnessed. Not a fight, not a confrontation, but a masterclass in discipline, humility, and the kind of power that doesn't need to be loud to be undeniable. And as he stepped outside, the bully watched him go, realizing with a sinking weight in his chest that the man he tried to humiliate had just given him something nobody else ever had, a lesson that might finally change him. This story touched millions of hearts. If it touched yours, let us know with a like, comment, yes, and subscribe or follow for more amazing stories like this.